Well, my name is Peggy Thompson. I am the technical manager for BI for the U.S. And I have the pleasure today of introducing a couple of our speakers. So we have Dr. John Curran, who is a clinical associate professor at Virginia Tech, and his focus is production management medicine, and certainly has a focus around cattle and parasitology. And then we have a producer friend of his, Tim Sutphin. Am I saying that right, Tim?
That's correct, yes.
And he is works closely with Dr. Curran, and he is going to tell us a little bit about his operation today. So with that, Mr. Tim, take it away.
Well, our farm is it's a family farm operation, but my wife and I started in some form or another about 40 years ago. We have 4 children. They're all involved in agriculture. Our youngest, our son, is on the farm with us, and then we also have 2 other longtime employees that have been there for a while. I grew up on a little small place with my mom and dad. We had grew up with about 15 cows and kind of developed a love for cattle through the ones that we had there, and 4-H program and FFA and that type of thing. Came to Virginia Tech, got a degree there in animal science, and I've been involved in a whole lot of different aspects of the beef cattle business through the years. Managed a farm for 13 years, and after I left that position, we started trying to put a farm together on our own. We originally were doing a lot of contract cattle. We kept stockers for other folks and got them straightened out, got them backgrounded, and then shipped them on to them. And then over time, we built a cow herd, and that's our primary focus today. We have a few less than 900 brood cows, which for our region is quite a bit larger than the normal size herd. There's not too many. There are a few, but there's not too many cow herds bigger than that one. And so we're supporting 4 families with our operation, and to try to help us out with that, we started a stocker operation a few years back, and we'd had some stockers from time to time through the years. It's gotten a little bit bigger over the last few years, and so those cattle are purchased, and some of those cattle are home raised too. And we can go into the background part of it, whatever you'd like, but basically, we own those cattle for varying degrees of time. Some of them for a short period, some of them will own for over a year. Ultimately, though, all those cattle do end up going to a feed lot and are fed out to slaughter weight. And we retain ownership on those. And we have a partnership with a feed lot in Nebraska, which is about 1,200 miles from where we're located. And those cattle are sent there and fed. And so I can go over some specifics if that's what you'd like for me to do about how we handle these cattle and where they come from and the type and that type of thing, if that's what you.
That would be great. That would be great.
Okay. Last year we bought about 700 head of stocker cattle. Again, for this area, that's probably a little bigger than average, but there are a few really big operators that handle several thousand stockers in this area. We're really in a other than the fact that we're getting urbanized more every day, and we're losing a lot of land to development. Our climate and the region that we're in is a very good place to raise cattle. We have cool season grasses. We can really, as compared to the entire United States, we probably can graze cattle longer and have more high quality feed on a year round basis than almost any place in the United States, because we're in a mountainous area, but they're small mountains, and we have a lot of valleys in between. So we get a good amount of rainfall. So we grow a lot of grass, and a lot of our land's not suited for anything else besides either cattle or sheep production, some kind of ruminant use of all these grasses that we're growing. And so we're in a really nice area for raising cattle. These stocker cattle, like I said, probably half of the cattle that we're running as stockers are cattle that we raised. They come out of our cow herd. They would be the lighter end of those. And the way we would end up handling those cattle, it varies from year to year. It's based on, market conditions and that type of thing. Sometimes those cattle would go through a fairly short backgrounding period of 45 to 60 days and then go straight on to the feed yard. Other times, we might graze those cattle longer or feed them longer. Those calves, those farm calves, generally we weigh all of our cows, and so one time, and then we use cleanup bulls after that. And that we've been doing that since on a whole herd basis since 1999. And so we feel like we've got a pretty nice group of cows. I think the genetic ability of those cattle to perform and do well is very good. And so those calves at preg check time, and at that time, those calves would be about 5 months old. They would get their first round of a 5-way respiratory vaccine, and they'd also get a Pastorella vaccine at that time. They get a boost of their Clostridial vaccines, and depending on the time of the year, we calve in the fall and the spring. So the calves might get dewormed. They may get implanted at those times, and maybe they wouldn't. And then like with fall calves that we're dealing with right now, those calves right before spring turnout, which would be in middle of April to the 1st of May, those calves were brought back in. And this year we used, they were boosted with another 5-way vaccine. And those cattle at that time, in addition, they got a Revelar G implant, and they also got the long range dewormer. And that product, we mainly just use it in the spring, the long range dewormer. And then those calves are getting weaned right. We're going to wean a big group of them today after we leave here. And they'll be backgrounded there at home on corn solids with a little bit of protein supplement and pasture for about 60 days. Generally, those calves then will ship to the feedlot about the 1st of September. And steer calves generally will weigh probably average about 800 pounds. Heifer calves about 700 pounds. The spring calves are on a similar program. They're just later in the year. They usually don't ship till January. Now on the stocker cattle, we use the stocker cattle to fill in if we have some time, or if we've got a location that we can use some cattle in, or we have some feed resources that we want to utilize. We fill all those gaps in with stocker cattle. And generally when we're buying cattle, I prefer to buy the cattle that have already been weaned and vaccinated and are on a verified program. If I can get those cattle bought, if I can get them bought for a price that that we can make some money on the cattle, that's what we'll try to do. Otherwise, the calves are either bought privately off of farms, and we do buy some cattle through the auction markets too. So depending on where they come from, if they come from a verified program, then generally all we do is reimplant the cattle and deworm the cattle and go from there. If they have not had that, then we'll go through the whole procedure like we did with our farm calves, with the 5-way, the Pastorella, and the 7-way, and implant and deworm those cattle. This probably for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been using the long-range dewormer product. And one of the primary reasons that we use it is a lot of these stocker cattle that we buy through the winter that are going to go out on grass in the spring. We have people, other farmers that contract with us. And so we send those cattle out, let's say around the 1st of April, and those folks keep those cattle until about the 1st of October. All these deals are a little different, but those folks are paid on a poundage basis for the gain that they're able to put on the cattle. But we process the cattle before they get them, and we're trying to make sure the cattle are straightened out and that the health is good on the cattle before they go. And so they'll get the program that we talked about earlier. But from April to October, a lot of those cattle, I won't even see them in that time frame. Some of them we do. It kind of depends on the operator and how good they are, and how well we trust their management. If we think we need to be checking on them more often, we do. But there are some of them that we don't see them at all in between, and those cattle are not getting worked or anything in between that either. So that long-range dewormer and a long-acting implant that we put in those cattle are really beneficial. And we've been very pleased with the results of that. Last year, the cattle that we had out on grass, some of these were farm-raised cattle, and some of them were purchased cattle. And we see we can see a really big difference, especially when we get to the feed yard, in the cattle that we raise and the cattle that we buy, in the performance on the cattle. But last year, the cattle that we had out on grass gained in a range of from 1.74 per day up to 2.19 a day. And most of those cattle were grazed, like I said, from 1st of April until September. The total gain on those cattle ranged anywhere from 284 pounds to 356 pounds. And in our area, calves that can gain 300 pounds during the summer on grass without any supplement, that's considered pretty good. And one of the nice things about the grass gains is that they're put on fairly economically. Most of these folks are being paid about 40 cents for each pound of gain that they put on the cattle, as compared to what we're dealing with right now because of high corn prices in the feedlot. The gain that's put on in feedlots right now is costing over $1 a pound to put a pound of gain on. So anything we can put on with grass is a big benefit to us. If there's any other questions about any of that or something else you'd like for me to go over that I haven't, be happy to do that.
Apologies, I was trying to come off mute there. I think you're on mute, Peggy.
So
Did you?
animal
I'm
density is about, and these stocker calves is going to run depending on the quality of the pasture, but a lot of fields, we're going to shoot for a 500 to 220 kilogram animal at start, up to when it comes off being somewhere in the 850 pounds, so 400 kilos when it comes off, would be about one animal per acre. Sorry, I don't know how to convert acres into any other units out there, but that would be the density. Some fields just you can get a little bit more dense, particularly for people who are doing rotational grazing. Other places, it's a little bit less dense than that.
Most all these cattle that we put out on contracts are continuously grazed. You know, we don't have any control over how they're going to manage those cattle as far as their pastures go. We tried to not overstock, give the cattle plenty of opportunity to gain. But every situation is a little bit different. You know, some of those pastures are grazed a little closer. Some of them are clipped. Some of them have had some fertilizer and weed control. Some of them have not. So just a little bit of everything.
Okay. I was just gonna switch here unless Gustavo has any questions. I was gonna advance your slides here and see. This was, did you want to speak to this at all? Or just talking about how much you get quite a bit of rain, seems like.
It does. I was surprised. I thought our average rainfall, when I pulled this slide up for Tim, I thought our average rainfall was in the high 30s. I was a little surprised at what it says it is, but that's straight off of Virginia weather system. So I have to believe that information. Our cool season grasses really suffer in July and August, in spite of the fact that we have a fair bit of rain in July, and that almost all comes in thunderstorms and in spurts, and then is gone very quickly. And so in spite of all that rain that you see that we get in July and August, we're actually tend to be fairly dry in July and August, and then heat, depending on whether you're in the mountains here, typically in the 80s, a little in the 90s. Other parts of the mid-Atlantic would get significantly hotter than that. Those cool season grasses go fairly dormant and don't grow as well. And most of the time, what the cattle are eating is extra growth that was allowed to come in the early part of spring from not overstocking that deal. Or producers like Tim may take some cattle off in July and August, and so lowering the animal density there.
Especially in the spring, we have a lot of clover in the pasture, a lot of legumes in the pasture, and of course that really helps the quality. And then through the fall, especially from August on, we can stockpile grass at that time. And, you know, we have fescue here in Virginia, and through the winter, you know, it makes a really nice feed to feed these cattle. And that's why when I said earlier that we could graze almost on a year-round basis, it's because of that, being able to stockpile that fescue. Our grass is not growing through the winter. It's pretty dormant, but if you have some stockpile there, a lot of times you can, depending on your stocking density and that type of thing, you can almost make it till spring. We usually try to, on our cow herd anyway, we probably end up feeding 60 to 90 days on them, but it depends on the season and how much rain we've had. Sometimes we might feed longer than that. That's probably as good as we could do. 60 days on some cows, probably 60 to 90 on most of the cows that we winter.
I'm not sure where people that are in the room are from, but our cool season grasses retain their nutrient value even after it freezes, frosts and freezes in the winter. They retain most of their nutrient value. They'll still be far above the nutrient requirements for all stages of production of cattle and remain palatable. Anybody that's here that's used to the warm season grasses, that's certainly not the case.
Yeah, well, it's been very informative, John and Tim. Thank you very much. But we just aware of the time. We have 20 minutes to discuss what has been presented by team. So the focus would be parasite control, and just a reminder, the basics of best practices for parasite control is treat the right animals with the right product in the right dose in the right time, and if you can, do something with the pasture management, right? So in this in under this umbrella, what can you do in your property team? Do you like treating the right animals? Do you treat all of them, or is it possible to leave a small proportion of the herd untreated?
Well, we obviously with our younger stock, we treat them a lot more aggressively for internal and external parasites than we do like mature cows. Pretty much mature cows, they might in the fall of the year they would get a something either the Sidectin product or an ivermectin type product for lice control. And then depending on how things go in the summer, sometimes we'll use a generic ivermectin type product just to maybe knock the fly numbers down. As far as the young stock goes, they're on a, except for those that are getting turned out that are just getting that long range product. Most of the other cattle are on a type of strategic deworming, but we do treat everything. We're not holding a group back when we're treating those cattle.
And is there a special reason why you treat all of them? You don't leave a small proportion untreated?
We don't, these cattle are only being handled once typically, and then going out to where they're not going to be handled again. And so other than using, trying to use anything other than just the animal's looks and guessing that animal's not parasitized, there's not really much ability to use any sort of fecal egg counts or that sort of thing to ascertain whether we could leave a small group there so we would have a refugia. That's one of the biggest concerns. If we're going to see resistance, it's certainly going to be in our stocker cattle operations. In our cow herds, we have the ability to leave cows there to produce some refugia, potentially, since at least here in the mid-Atlantic, we've not been able to document problems with worms in adult cows that we can measure. But in the stocker operations, it has always been and continues to be people to do all of those calves. The average daily gain is so important to the profitability of the stocker operation that that is not a tool that's in leaving any sort of thing, which is less than ideal from a parasite resistance standpoint, but thus far has been the best thing for producers. Not maybe in the long term, but certainly what we've done.
Yeah, so it's if I understood it properly, so refugia is not implemented because the concern that the profitability will be decreased. If you leave a couple of animals untreated, they're not going to gain as much weight as the rest of the herd, and that will be that will be losses for the producer. That's the main reason, right?
Yes, sir.
And then there is no reason to do any diagnostics, because if you do blanket treatment, you don't need to. The other question that I would have is, do you test the efficacy of any antiparasitic, or John or Tim?
Not on Tim's operation specifically. I do a fair bit of parasite research, and so we do a fair bit of fecal egg count reduction testing as part of those research projects. And we continue here in our region, and based on the results of that fecal egg count reduction testing, we continue to see good activity from all the products we use. Certainly, we get a little better fecal egg count reduction testing from the benzimidazole class of dewormers. But that's particularly in our cow-calf operations, we have a lot of Cuperia, and so you get better control of that. We're predominantly worried about Australtasia in our stocker cattle operations, and we've not seen resistance problems in any of the research data collection projects we've done.
So from team's perspective, he doesn't feel like really motivated to do any fecal egg count reduction test. He would trust on your advice, right, John?
That's probably right. I mean, in past years, we have done some from time to time, but it didn't seem like that we've discovered anything that we didn't expect. And we, in this climate that we're in, we know that all these cattle are going to be exposed to the parasites. It's wet and warm here in the grazing season, and so we don't have really a time when these cattle are not going to be exposed. And so if we're going to maintain the performance that we want with the cattle, I mean, we understand that we're going to have to, these cattle are going to have to be kept on a deworming program.
Very good.
I'm interested to know how it is in Mexico. We've got two people from Mexico on the line.
Yes.
Carlos, Jose, any thoughts from your side?
Yes, thank you.
Perhaps it's a good idea to turn on your camera, Carlos, and Josue as well.
And Michelle, we'd like to see your beautiful faces. I've had to turn mine off because I'm sitting in the middle of a very heavy thunderstorm and it's affecting the internet connection, which is affecting the recording. So I apologize for that. But Carlos, we see your face staring out at us. Please tell us about the situation in Mexico.
Can you hear us, Carlos?
Very bad, but I hear. I have a storm in this place, but the internet is unstable.
Perhaps we should hear what Josue has to say about it. If in Mexico there is any producer trying to implement refugia, Josue, can you hear us?
Yes, good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Hi.
Greetings.
Hi.
What is the question, Gustavo?
Oh,
Sorry.
so no, we were just trying to bridge what was informed by John and team to the situation in Mexico. So in team's property, it's not feasible to implement refugia, at least not in the way that by leaving a small proportion of the animals untreated, because there is a concern that this will impact in the profitability of the farm operation.
Mm-hmm.
So would that be the same in Mexico, or do you know any property that they are already working with refugia or TST?
No, not really. Not really. This practice is no. The farmers in Mexico don't have that opportunity or that chance of made diagnostics tools first. Is the most important to choose and treatment, but no refugia. They don't have that information in the grazing farmers.
Oh, okay. So in the US, the concern is more related to the profitability, but in Mexico, this is not implemented, or refugia is not implemented because of lack of information, as
Yes, yes, yes. That's the reason.
And what did you say about diagnostic testing? Did you say it's not implemented or it is?
No, it's a question for John. It's a question for John. Why don't you don't use the diagnostic tool? Why? What is the reason? It's a question. Yes.
Sure. So in these particular stocker operations, as a general rule, from the time they are purchased, these cattle are only going to go down the chute one time. And so that's the only time they're going to be handled. And we know from all the research that we've done that the majority of these cattle are significantly infected during the grazing season. And we know that deworming those cattle through all of our projects will result in significant increase in weight gains. And so we have just done blanket treatments as part of that recommendation. From an academic standpoint and from a concern long-term resistance wise, that's certainly not the best answer. But that's why it's being done the way it's being done.
Okay.
Because some of these places that Tim's going to take these cattle out to, him and numerous other producers, will not have facilities to get these cattle worked once they go out to grass and leave his main operation.
Okay.
So you
because in Mexico.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, because in Mexico we have tried to implement diagnostic tools in the field, grazing. I think we'll go good results. Thank you.
Did you say with good results, Jose?
Yeah.
So what are you doing?
Yeah, we have a microscope with our team.
Yeah.
With our sales team, we have 7 microscopes, and I think it's a good tool to show the farmers the importance of diagnostic.
But then how is it done in practical terms? So the sales rep will visit a farm and then he will collect feces samples and I don't know exam them, and then if the result is I don't know 200 eggs per gram, then you recommend treatment. Is that how it is done?
Yes.
So it's more like it. Perhaps it. So as far as I understood, so it's kind of the producer is not aware of the losses that parasites can cause, so they wouldn't treat the animals. So you have to show them, yeah, there are parasites, so they need treatment. Is that the reason?
That's the reason. Yes, Gustavo.
Okay.
I struggle, and I'll ask for anybody's input here. I struggle for what the level of fecal egg count that we should be treating at. We did a big multi-thousand head study here, and we took fecal samples from every single calf and did not deworm a portion of them. Dewormed we took a fecal sample, stratified them, matched them up, and dewormed every other calf, trying to get at that question of what fecal egg count would result in the need to treat. And our results, and what I understand from looking at some other people's work, that only does so good a job. Our fecal egg count, particularly with regard to Ostratasia, is only so good at predicting the value of deworming and that sort of thing, at least at the moderate levels. Is that, anybody else have that understanding or have some better information for me?
John, there is a paper that was recently published, in the beginning of the year. A large number of animals were followed by a Brazilian researcher. And I can't remember the exact number of animals, and he did more or less like you have done there. So he evaluated zebu cattle and also Bos taurus. I think it was Angus. And for young animals, let's talk about the zebu first. The threshold was around 75 eggs per gram of feces. This for zebu. Less than that, the animals would evolve just like the treated ones. But for the Angus, it's like 10 eggs per gram of feces is already impacting the weight gain. So it's Angus are super susceptible to gastrointestinal nematodes.
You know what nematode he was working with, Gustavo?
In Brazil, in those area, they would have Trichostrongylus, Emoncus, and Esophagostomum. Yeah. But for older animals, 2 years old cows, the impact, as we would expect, is the impact of gastrointestinal nematodes is not that big. I can send you this paper if you want.
Yeah, it'd be great, because Ann Zajac published our other paper, our parasitologist here, but we had a hard time figuring out, based on that study, what our recommendations traditionally been 100 eggs per gram, but we've also seen a huge, the widespread use of macrocyclic lactones, as we've seen a huge shift in our pastures, and we see a lot more Cuperia than we do Austrortasia on a lot of these pastures, and so that impacts fecal egg counts quite considerably.
Yeah, there was another finding in this paper. I'm just remembering. The zebu cattle, the weaned zebu cattle, in spite of higher infection or higher numbers in fecal egg counts, they would still perform very well. So the funny about it, as the higher the fecal egg count, the higher was the weight gain. So then it's just not easy to explain that. Yeah, there's probably one way, because if you there are several papers proving that when the fecal egg count result is low, it's just difficult to relate that with productivity or production. That there's so much variability in the results that it only matters if it is like super high or 200, 300 EPG, then it's important. But 50, 25 doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I think that's what hurt us in our study. We had a lot of cattle at moderately low levels, and the ability, that wasn't the first limiting factor to their growth.
Yeah.
Now yesterday, Gustavo, Johannes mentioned the economic threshold being 200 eggs per gram. Now, was he, when I asked him, he was specifically speaking of young stock, but I still think I still think the answer is it depends.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. But what he was presenting yesterday is that if the fecal egg count result is higher than 200 eggs per gram, then the chances of the animal develop clinical signs is super big. but it doesn't mean that that's not the subclinical threshold for treatment.
Right.
It's much
Right.
lower than that. Yes, I agree with you. And this is what Johannes was trying to tell everyone yesterday, and also Eric in his presentation. Parasite control nowadays is not simple anymore. I mean, if you want to do the right thing and control the parasites in a sustainable way, it's going to be complicated. So you have to evaluate so many variants. Right?
Yes, and mentioning refugia, where everybody wants a specific number of how many to leave untreated. I think that's the other thing, is it depends. But I think even in his, so he said start small. And so like in Tim's operation though, I mean, 8 to 10% of your operation, if you were to leave 10% of those stalkers untreated, you would, based on your climate and rainfall situation and just perfect conditions, right, for parasites, you would probably be concerned that those 10% you left untreated would not be as profitable.
Yes, but there's another issue that we keep forgetting. So if you leave 10% of the animals untreated, you're going to lose a little money in the end of the season. But what is going to happen with your pasture for the following year? So there will be the parasitological challenge will be much higher, I suppose. The pasture will be with a lot of L3 to infect the animals. So this is another thing that has to be studied as well. What is the impact of refugia on the long term?
Long term, yes.
Yeah, the problem here in the U.S., at least in my area and my understanding, and that sort of thing, is we have not seen those resistance problems that can be recognized very readily. And therefore, much like we were 25 years ago with the sheep deal, we're still doing the same procedures that we've done, because what we're really trying to prevent is that subclinical animal and that 20 to 60 pounds of extra weight gain, 10 to 30 kilos of extra weight gain that we're expecting from a more aggressive deworming therapy. We're trying to avoid that. And I grant that we are ignoring the long-term potential negative side effects of those products becoming, in fact, not working. We've been through such a golden era of having good functioning products that have done a very good job for a very long time. The mindset here is going to be difficult to change, I'm afraid, and could be like the sheep, and it could be much too late before we get that changed.
Yes, and I'm curious, I know we are coming to time, Gustavo, so I'm curious, Dr. Arnold, I know you're in Kentucky, I think, if that's correct. And I was just curious if you could share, Tim shared his practices for stalkers. Is it different in Kentucky, or what can you share with us about Kentucky?
We're very similar to the other areas we've talked about already. I think possibly the one difference we're trying to implement in most of the stalker operations is to use a combination dewormer, use a white dewormer, a benzimidazole plus a macrocyclic lactone at the same time, especially when we use the long range. And that seems to improve our results. And if I'm recalling this correctly, it's supposed to help with that long tail that we see with long range, where you got where it's really getting towards the end of its efficacy. So and they really like it. Most of the stalker producers have adopted that, love it, and it just tends to give them a better clean out. And like in our area, if they're on grass, they're going to get reinfected. I mean, that's just the way it is. We do have the perfect conditions most of the time for parasites. So we also do some other things. They try to, for example, rotationally graze so that they don't take the grass down so low, and where they'll pick up all the L3s. And then they also will institute, like maybe take a cutting of hay off of one of the fields where their stalkers were, something to try to interrupt that process. So I think I had one case last year of the type 2 I can't even say it, osteotigasis, and we actually had that break, and they had used long range, but back in April, and then the calves broke in about September. Well, by that time it was over. The long range was gone. Not sure when they were infected, but that stalker producer lost, I think it was around 10 calves. It was the first time I had ever seen that. That just dramatic weight loss. These calves just broke with diarrhea, and boom.
Wow.
They looked like they were skin and bones overnight. And they came here to the diagnostic lab, and they were necropsied, and they were still fat. I mean, they still had fat, in around the kidneys, fat in the heart, but it basically just took their muscle mass away. So
Goodness.
yeah, I think we have to be careful with some of these long-term products, because long range is labeled for 150 days only for lungworms. It's 120 for the rest.
For osteotagia.
Right. So I think we run into some problems with that when producers think it should last a full 150 days.
Yes, I agree. And so when you said combination treatment, Dr. Arnold, is that like the benzimidazole and the macrocyclic lactone at the same time at the beginning of the grazing season?
Correct.
Okay. Now, so Dr. John, are you seeing any of that implemented where you are?
We are, and we do have some stalker producers that are doing that. I've been a little resistant to do that, although after, and that was actually BI. I had Ray Kaplan give a good talk. I had several producers that listened to that talk back in the winter about why utilizing both those at the same time actually can help delay resistance still. We've seen a little more uptake of that. Certainly there are a couple of research studies out there. There's an old one in the feedlot that showed a benefit when they entered the feedlot. And there's a couple now in grazing cattle that have done that. So we're seeing a little bit of uptake of that, certainly. And when you do fecal egg count reduction testing, certainly you see a benefit to that. We have a research project going on this summer, actually looking at combination therapy versus not. Now that's actually this is actually going to be in calves that are spring-born calves suckling cows, midsummer deworming for them, trying to look at that so we can get some numbers to do that. But it's starting to be implemented. I would say maybe 10 to 20% of the producers, but they do tend to be the larger producers that have implemented some of that deal, at least time of year dependent.
Yeah, so I think you're asking a producer to pay more, right, when you're recommending 2 dewormers. So Dr. Arnold, is there a secret to how you present that to your producers?
That's a really good question, because we have, I don't know about the rest of the world, but we have generic ivermectin products readily available here, and they're very cheap compared to the branded products. So I think that's probably, there was some mention of cupuria and how it's become such a problem, and it's probably due to that generic ivermectin because it's used like water. Everybody uses it. So I have played it more from, if you'll use a white dewormer along with your microcyclic lactone, that you can take care of some of that cupuria problem. It's usually very effective against cupuria.
Right.
So, and I try to steer them away from the generic ivermectin into some of the other branded products, at least for the young stock thing. It's
Yes.
try to push that the young animals are the ones that are really at risk for problems.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, Peggy, I'm just aware of the time. We have another 3 minutes to allow the people to go to the break and then return to the plenary call for the parasitological.
Jose had a question or had his hand up, I think.
Yeah, he's got his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question about this annual calendar. How often do you change your treatment? I mean, if you change molecules, how often?
That or you want me to? We, on most of these operations, they have used one of the various macrocyclic lactones for a long time. Up until, I would say, the last 4 to 5 years, benzimidazole had fallen significantly out of favor with the rise and talk of resistance and that sort of thing. Most all of them. We traditionally, going back for 30 years, have thought of the persistent activity associated with the macrocyclic lactones as being a huge advantage and part of a strategic deworming program, whether it was the extra 2 to 4 weeks you get with the various macrocyclic lactones. And then, in my own personal stocker operation, we would pour those cattle at turnout, get them back up with Sidectin or Ivomec, 6 to 8 weeks after that, re-implant those cattle and deworm at the time. And that was our strategic deworming program for cleaning up the pastures. I can tell you from an animal performance standpoint, that's a very good program. And we see, every one of our studies says we see, like I said, we've seen an extra 30 to, on some of the old Ivomec SR bolus weight gain deals, we saw an extra 100 pounds of weight gain versus only a single deworming at turnout. So stocker operators have used almost no benzimidazoles except for maybe for clean out. Where we try to use those is clean out if they're going into a confinement feeding deal or if they're bought at the winter time. So it's been almost exclusively macrocyclic lactones of one or another. The reintroduction of long range several years ago has made it very popular amongst the stocker operators trying to achieve that strategic deworming. Once again, what we're doing today currently for animal performance and productivity and economics, to Gustavo's point, is certainly not an ideal thing from a long-term welfare of those particular products and their long-term effectivity.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.
One thing I might add about our operation and what we do is one of the things that we do try to do is treat these animals with the amount of dewormer that they actually need.
Yes.
Boron products, they're grossly overused, and the amounts that are used are more than the animals need most of the time. And the other thing I was going to add was that these stocker cattle that we have are running on pretty large boundaries. And so, they're not in a confined space. Several years ago, We have some sheep in our operation. Several years ago, we had a study with the Ag Research Service here, and we had ewes on very small paddocks with pretty high numbers. And at that time, we were probably using maybe even Tramasol or something. It's been a while back, but we did see some resistance with those. And the only other thing I would say is that on these stalker deals, and I guess somebody that knows more about it than me can tell me, but most of these cattle, when they come off in October, those pastures don't see cattle again until April. And so over the winter, there's not any cattle there that are
Right.
at least shedding any new parasites to the pasture. That you get quite a bit of winter overkill there. So
Right.
And do you weight the animals to reach the proper dose, or how do you do this?
well,
Normally the animals are not weighted. I mean, this is around the globe.
well, a lot of times ours are.
Yeah.
When they run through a facility on our squeeze chute, we have a set of scales. And
Okay.
a lot of these are new purchase cattle, so we know what they weighed when we bought them.
Cool. That's very
Sure.
good. Yeah.
So that's a really good thing, right? As far as helping prevent resistance, as well as making sure we dose correctly. But I think Tim, you're probably, I would say, when you think Dr. Kern and Dr. Arnold, that's probably the minimum. That's probably not, most people probably don't use scales. Or what percentage would you say producers use scales to make that decision?
The majority of our producers don't use scales. Like Tim mentioned, on the stalker side, a lot of these cattle are being dewormed right after purchase, and so they would have a they would know pretty much what the rate range of those cattle were. One of the problems when Ivomec first came out, because it was the expensive dewormer, people dewormed for the minimum calf that was in the group or the minimum of the weight. I would say we've gotten better now that people will deworm for the maximum calf weight in the group, or if they're buying between we call 5 weights, animals weigh between 500 and 600 pounds, they're willing to deworm them. The cost of those products at one time really scared people, and they tried to cut it short. I'd say we're doing a better job with that now. To kind of wrap up, I think Tim kind of brought up a great point there, and kind of what Michelle and some other people said. Our big challenge right now is to get people to use dewormers in the right animals at the right time. There's been way too much concern about what dewormers better than others and that sort of thing, and certainly there are some differences. But my real struggle with producers is trying to make sure they're giving the right animals dewormer at the right time, and that to help limit the use. Michelle kind of said there, when generic ivermectin costs less than bottled water, it becomes much too easy to use that every time the cattle come through the chute, and that's less than ideal.
Yes,
absolutely.
Peggy, I need to. We need to close this session.
Indeed, we have a break now.
Yeah.
Until 1:30, when you can go back to the plenary room. If you wish to, you can go back to the plenary room before that. It is open, but we thought you might appreciate the chance for a bio break, or grab a cup of coffee or a cold drink.
Excellent. Well, I just want to send my sincere thank yous to Dr. Curran and Tim. We appreciate you sharing your story with us today. Thank you, Dr. Arnold and Jose and Carlos for helping and helping us understand what works in your part of the world, or what happens in your part of the world as well.
Indeed, thank you very much. It's been really interesting. Enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thanks for exploring.
Take care.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.